Hi, and welcome to Best in Tesla. So, I have a lot of people saying that I am wrong in some of my prediction about the EV adoption. And I could be. It is, of course, just predictions. But the argument people mostly use is because they have seen other forecasts from EAI and EIA and OPEC and Bloomberg and so on, and they say something totally different. Well, I am glad that my prediction is not the same as EIA, because they have been embarrassingly wrong about predicting the EV adoption. EIA is very good at collecting data and showing us what had happened last year, but they're not always very good at predicting what will happen, especially when we're talking about innovation and exponential growth. This is something us humans are very bad at understanding in general, but these guys are analysts and work with data every single day, so we should expect them to be very good at predicting things. But unfortunately, that is not always the case. And I would like to talk about that today, why I don't just take forecasts from EIA or OPEC as how things will turn out. And why we have to do our own numbers. And why I trust someone like ARK Invest much more when it comes to innovative companies, because that is all they work with. So they do understand exponential growth. And they have been right so far, and we have some prediction from ARK Invest and EAI and OPEC from back in 2016 on how many EVs would be sold here in 2022. So I thought it would be quite funny looking back and see those predictions from 2016, which is not that long ago, but you would probably be surprised on just how wrong some of them were. And then try to look at some of the prediction of today and see if they learn from any of their mistakes and where this might be heading. So let's check it all out and let's dive right in. So, EIA stands for Energy Information Administration. And what do? Well, as they write on their website, independent statistic and analysis. So these guys should be able to do some forecast of what is going to happen, because this is kind of what they do. And in 2014, EIA estimated the global annual sales of EVs would be 200,000 units in 2022. So less than what Tesla on their own made in just Q1 of 2022. Tesla made more EVs on their own in 2018, only 4 years later than this forecast from EIA. Now that is some embarrassing predictions. They did only 2 short years later, in 2016, raise their target for 2022 tenfold to 2 million EVs in 2022, but still not enough. Only 2 years later, in 2018, the EV market was above 2 million in annual sales. How can they be so wrong in such a short amount of time? Because they only expected linear growth. They did not see the electric car as a disruptive technology. But ARK Invest back in 2016 forecasted 17 million EVs in 2022. So no wonder if people looked at EIA's numbers of 2 million and ARK Invest numbers of 17 million and thought ARK Invest was crazy. But ARK Invest said back in 2016 that by 2022 the demand for electric vehicles will begin to outpace the demand for gasoline-powered cars. And that is exactly what has happened, as I talked about a couple of weeks back. A new report from EY showed that globally 52% of people wanted to buy EVs for their next car. So yes, the demand for EVs has started to outpace the demand for ICE cars here in 2022. So well done, ARK Invest. Spot on prediction. And now it's just the supply that cannot keep up with this crazy demand. And someone else that was even more embarrassingly wrong was OPEC. That stands for Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, and OPEC's main purpose is to ensure stable and responsible oil prices. So there are 13 countries that rely on their predictions. And their prediction in 2016 was that annually, that EV sales in 2022 would be 100,000 EVs. So they didn't see any uptake in the EVs whatsoever. These guys should be ashamed of themselves to be this poor at predicting this when countries rely on them. This is embarrassing. In 2017, the year after OPEC's prediction, Tesla by themselves made 100,000 EVs. So we don't know yet if ARK will be right with the 17 million EVs here in 2022, but we can say both EIA and OPEC were embarrassingly wrong. The global EV sales in Q1 of 2022 was just about 2 million. And that is with the lockdown in China, supply chain issue all over the board. We still saw almost a doubling from Q1 2021, where there was about 1.1 million EVs sold. So at least a doubling of EVs in 2022 should be pretty safe to say that is home safe, and that would be close to 14 million EVs. So we need about 3 million more in growth for the rest of the year for ARK Invest prediction from 2016 to come true. And China, the world's biggest car market that sits on 40% of the world car market, is more than doubling so far, even with the pandemic lockdown. New energy vehicle has been up 120% so far in the first 5 months of the year, and that is set to increase for the last part of the year. And as all the automakers right now want to ramp up EV production, I can only see that the second half of this year will be a very good one for the EV production. So I do think we will see close to ARK Invest prediction from 2016 of 17 million here in 2022. So no matter what, there is no doubt that the plug-in sales since 2016 are very exponential and not very linear. But it's like the analyst hasn't learned anything. If we look at the report from Deloitte from July 2020, they even got the forecast of 2020 wrong. Even with half of the sales already in the books. Their global EV forecast was for a compound annual growth rate of 29% achieved over the next 10 years. Total EV, and as you can see, that includes hybrid as well. So electric vehicle sales growth from 2.5 million in 2020, which ended up being 3.3 million, to 11.2 million in 2025, then reaching 31.1 million in 2030. EVs would secure approximately 32% of the total market share for new car sales. Well, here we are just 2 years later, and we will be above Deloitte's 11.2 million for 2025 here in 2022. And as we could see, they didn't even get 2020 numbers right, because they're still looking at this in a pretty linear growth. But here's a chart if we only put in 15 million for 2022 and not ARK Invest 17 million. We can still see the growth is exponential. Even if we only put in 12 million this year, it still shoots up like a rocket, and even 12 million will still be above Deloitte's 2025 prediction. So we have to take this into calculation. If they are off by more than 40% in 2020, even though they had all the data for the first half of the year, how much will they be off for the rest of the forecast in this decade? I mean, 31 million in 2030? I expect we will get to that already in 2024, maybe even 2023, depending on the battery supply. Because many things, material and charging infrastructure, will slow down the EV adoption, and batteries will for sure be the limiting factor. But every mining company is scrambling to get more mines opening, because they know they will basically be printing money, because they will be able to sell everything they dig up from the ground. And as we also see in Australia, they have even opened old abandoned mines, and the new core lithium mine in Darwin will start supplying Tesla with lithium already by the end of this year. So the mines are being opened as fast as possible, so they will be the limiting factor, but they will open a lot of them in this decade. And as for the charging network, I am not so worried. There are hundreds of companies putting up chargers right now because they want to be part of the future energy sector that will be electricity. electricity, including all the oil companies like Shell and BP and so on. So charges are going up in the thousands every single month. Just Tesla alone is ramping up after all their trouble they had in the first quarter. They have put up more than 650 charging stalls in just the first 3 weeks of June. And governments like we see in the US and UK and Germany and many more are now also stepping up and will help with the charging infrastructure. So I have no doubt that we will see this really start to shoot for the moon over the next couple of years as well. And remember, house owners like myself charge 95% at home, so we will hardly use any of the charging network. And we have to remember that solar prices are still going down, even though it's already today the cheapest form of electricity, and battery prices will also continue to go down. The rise of material cost is only temporary. And remember, Tesla can build a huge battery power plant in less than 90 days. And Tesla is not the only one, so we will see many huge new battery peaker plants with renewable energy popping up all over the world within this decade, helping out our grid, providing cheap energy, as we have seen countless examples of now, just how good a business case these battery peaker plants are. But another company that is trying to make a forecast is EIA, the International Energy Agency. Again, they should be expert, right? But as soon as we're talking about disruptions, they totally miss the mark. Continuously, EIA's forecast of deployment of solar has been wrong every single year for 20 years with more than 30%. You should think they would learn after 10 years of being wrong, but that is just not the case. And the same problem happens when we talk about the other side of the disruptions, and that is the collapse of the old industry. IEA has also been wrong on how fast that will go every single year for 25 years. So I don't think the charging infrastructure will slow us down, especially when people start to see charging available at their homes, at works and hotels, apartment buildings and so on. And materials will be the limiting factor on how fast this will go, but the entire industry is ramping up as fast as physically possible. And if we think it can happen this fast, just remember Tony Seba's example about the transportation sector when it went from horse to cars. The bulk of the disruption happened in just 10 years. From 11% to 81% happened in just 10 years. But at the same time, we had to build two whole new industries, the auto industry and the oil industry, but also had to build the whole new road infrastructure. And we also had a World War I in that period and the influenza pandemic. And people like Deloitte are worried that the charging infrastructure will slow us down. It is much easier to build a charging infrastructure than it was building the whole road infrastructure. So I am not so worried about that. We have accomplished much tougher things in the past. This will happen very fast. So I think ARK Invest is going to be very close again when they say 40 million EVs in 2025. And someone like Deloitte will be very far off with its prediction of 31 million in 2030, as they were wrong in 2020. And we already know they will be way off with their 2025 prediction, because we will be way above those numbers already this year. So it's not that these people are incapable of making prediction. It is just every time we are talking about disruption, they get it wrong because they have a linear mindset. And exponential growth is very hard to understand in general. Just remember the single rice corn example of the chessboard I showed in my video of the paradigm paralysis that becomes the size of Mount Everest in just 64 moves. That's exponential growth. But the so-called expert being wrong is not a new thing. This is pretty much what always happens when we are talking about innovation and disruptive technology. The experts, the insiders, are usually the ones that dismiss disruptive opportunities. The best example is probably Kodak, that not only got disrupted by the digital camera, but the ironic thing is, it was Kodak that invented the digital camera. But even though they did not see what was coming and dismissed the opportunity. So remember to do your own research when it comes to disruptions, or at least look for guidance with someone who actually understands innovations like Tony Seba or ARK Invest. If you use conventional forecast, the chances are you will be very far off the mark, especially when we look 10 years out in the future. And thank you for watching. And until next time, take care out there and be nice.